Ramping it back up this offseason. Juicy fun at Four Peaks. Juicy fun on the Twitter streets this morning, Bo Brack, with relation to candidate numero uno, Sean Payton, via Benjamin Albright, who covers the NFL and the Denver Broncos, posting this on Twitter today. Quote, from everything I've heard, it doesn't appear Sean Payton has much of a market. The jobs he wanted didn't open outside of Denver. We'll see about AZ. There has not been much interest. Strong possibility he goes back to TV. But then, Bo, he follows up with this. I'm going to read this off of my notes here. Quote, with all the stuff flying around today about Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, I would say this about the Broncos and Sean Payton. With Sean Payton not having a scheduled in-person interview, it would suggest that the Broncos' focus is elsewhere at this time. Our guy, Howard Balzer, of course, broke the news yesterday that Payton was coming to Arizona on Thursday to meet with Sean Payton, then doubled down after our show and said, not only was that happening, but hey, folks in Denver, pump the brakes. That interview is delayed, inevitably postponed, albeit maybe canceled. Sean Payton is not going to connect with the Denver Broncos this week. Maybe talks have kind of fizzled out, which means, Bo Brack, the only thing left standing on this schedule with Sean Payton is a trip to the Valley on Thursday.
Stars are aligning, aren't they? The stars are aligning. Walmart is taking their khakis and their blue light specials and their slogan,
great value franchise out
and they're taking it. And they're going to hire Dan Quinn, and they're going to live in mediocrity, and they're going to have one of the longest postseason droughts continue with their washed quarterback and their defensive coordinator head coach. Go ahead and do it. It's curious. I'm curious to think, did our guy Howard Balzer and his breaking of that news, did it torpedo talks between Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos? Did they feel slighted that he was willing to talk to the Cardinals? Because they probably feel like, okay, we're negotiating against ourselves right now. It doesn't seem to be anybody else in the conversation right now. You could still find it on the DraftKings Sportsbook app that I believe he's minus 125 to be the next head coach of the Broncos, right? Now those odds shifted back in favor of the Cardinals as well. I think I last saw he was plus 250 to become the next Cardinals head coach. So not a whole lot of people know where he's going, but the odds continue to kind of vary a little bit with Sean Payton and where he could potentially coach next year. But it feels like Michael Bidwill might have slow played himself into a pretty good spot here. Worst case scenario, Sean Payton goes back to TV. You didn't miss out on the biggest fish as far as the coaching candidates go, or you could potentially get him as your next head coach and kind of taking your franchise quarterback and getting him back on track in Kyler Murray.
Like everybody spitting out like a hyperbole, this narrative that, well, you couldn't have any executives in place because you want Sean to pick everybody. I've been of the mindset, like maybe if you wanted one singular guy, that would have been the right move. But I feel like they're best equipped now to court Sean on Thursday. Dave Sears, a guy with a lot of success in Detroit, a lengthy resume in the NFL. Of course, Monti Ossenfort, the new GM. As much as I like Michael Bidwill and his ability to write fat checks, I want football people in front of Sean Payton to convince him, we know what we're doing. Please help us. Let's win a championship here. Not Michael Bidwill by himself. And I feel like that's a deterrent right now with Denver. These Walmart people, these new owners, yes, they've got a lot of cash. But listen, at the end of the day, it's going to be $25 million wherever he goes. It's about winning championships. He wants to get into the Hall of Fame. You think his best route into the Hall of Fame and trying to win another Super Bowl is entering a division with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes and the gauntlet of AFC quarterbacks? Did you see the quarterback play in the NFC this year? It's Brock fucking Purdy, right? It's Daniel Jones won a playoff game. Right. He knows the NFC. And supposedly Carolina, like that was due diligence. Seems like they're kind of out of Sean Payton right now. We could be 48 hours away from this tide turning completely in favor of the Arizona Cardinals, assuming the compensation isn't a problem. And it sounds like it's not, because you get to this point, there's an understanding from Michael Bidwill and company like, yeah, we got to give up draft picks. Yeah, we know how much Sean is asking for with his salary. I wonder if this was purposely done by Bidwill and company and Sean Payton, like, let me vet everybody else first. I'll come to you last. Give me your best offer, your best pitch. Let's see if we can work something out. I mean, you've got to feel about as optimistic as you felt as a Cardinal fan if you want Sean Payton than even when the search even started, because we've avoided all these landmines of like, is Brandon Staley going to get fired? Is Sean McVay going to walk away? What's going on with Mike McCarthy? Turns out none of that happened. And then now apparently the Denver Broncos, there's reports now, people around the NFL are leaking this out, like Russell Wilson is washed. You're going to hitch your wagon to a quarterback. Like, listen, Kyler Murray's not perfect, but he's not damaged goods. He's going to be back next year, and he's in his mid-20s, and it's the NFC. Right. You're going to hitch your wagon to an expensive older player in Russell Wilson. You got Colin Cowherd today, who talks with Sean Payton, like him or not, completely flipping his tone, saying, I'd pass on the Denver Broncos. Yeah. So you've got to feel at least semi-optimistic that Thursday you've got a shot to make an impression.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that they were evaluating Russell Wilson at the end of last season was, he made a couple good throws here. It was like how we evaluated Josh Rosen his rookie season. Yeah. There wasn't like a full game's worth of film where you're like, there's Russ. There's the guy that we recognize from all those years in Seattle. No. And we're seeing for a second straight offseason that the Denver Broncos and this ownership that we keep on being told is steady, instead of that they just have deep pockets, that they kind of just get schooled in the NFL. This is the NFL. This isn't Walmart. This isn't, big superstores. This is the NFL, and they're chewing them up and they're spitting them out. And they thought that they were the only team and only that was going to be courting Sean Payton. And Payton's group, they knew that. So they had to conjure up something. And where we were sitting here last week at this time saying, where's the Payton interview? What's happening here? And it's the same thing. It's from The Departed, like in the Scorsese film with Leonardo DiCaprio. How do you spot a cop? You just ask him. He says he's not a cop. Like, that was the Arizona Cardinals, right? They were just waiting for their opportunity. They're letting the Denver Broncos kind of get the headlines for all last week. But like you said, this is the week. This is where the interviews are ramping up. This is where you can separate the legitimate candidates from the pretenders out there. And the Arizona Cardinals can very well make themselves the legit, maybe top seed contender for Sean Payton's services in 2023 on Thursday.
You would remember the Ken Whisenhunt Peyton Manning sweepstakes, and the Cardinals were one of the first teams to meet with Peyton, but it wasn't until the end when Peyton got in house with John Elway and they sealed the deal. And they were one of the last people, the last organizations to meet with Peyton Manning. You're of the benefit to be last in line. Sean Payton now has no remaining interviews with teams outside of Thursday, right? Carolina, and we're going to talk about this. Bo and I are going to give our predictions of what we think is going to go down in our next segment. Carolina, the favorite is Sean Stetchen, or the Eagles offensive coordinator, Shane Stetchen. Yeah, butchered his name 3 times. The offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Mike Kafka is getting multiple interviews there. Like Sean Payton, I think a lot of teams now, the longer this goes on, the easier it is for teams and fans, because we've seen it, to talk themselves out of Sean Payton. Sean Payton, I think, had a lot of glitz and glamour in November and December. And then as these teams meet with other candidates and they look at their resume and they say, hey, you did a lot of good stuff this year and you're free in terms of draft compensation, and we have to pay you a fraction of what we pay Sean Payton, it's easy to walk back commitments. And I saw it in the chat, Bo and I were texting about this off air. The Saints have overplayed their hand. Yeah. They have butchered this. This went from maybe a day 2 pick to multiple 1s and 2s. Get the hell out of here with that. Right. No one is paying you that. Sean's compensation is taken care of. It's not our money. Pay him whatever he needs. Let him go to work. But the Saints mystery team garbage that Diana Rossini, who I believe, believes this because she was told this, of ESPN, saying that there's a team out there just waiting. No, there's not. There's 5 teams with openings. No one else is getting fired. McCarthy's safe. Nothing. This is just the Saints attempting to drum up, as we saw from our guy Benjamin Albright, to drum up a market for Sean Payton that could only be after Thursday, Cardinals or bust.
I just don't. I see in the chat and everybody's killing it, but I see, he has become such a polarizing name from this fan base, and they get scared off by the sticker price for Sean Payton. But look, the Cardinals can negotiate this thing. And yes, to your point, as far as them overplaying this hand brutally, I mean, it's at the end of the day, the best head coach for Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals to expedite a rebuild and find their way out of the last place in the NFC West and contending with these teams that are coached by Pete Carroll and Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay is Sean Payton. I mean, that's your best option. That remains your best option. And you start to figure out, what's realistic compensation, because, if the Broncos go ahead and hire somebody between now and the end of the week, they're out of the picture. And Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland and the brass there in New Orleans know that it's either if Sean Payton wants to coach this season, you can't hold him hostage. This was a guy that did wonders, unbelievable things in a city that needed it for close to 2 decades. You can't hold him hostage because you want to capitalize as much as you possibly can. Plus, and many people have admitted this, like, next year it becomes a completely different conversation. He's under contract through 2024, but if he hits the open market again next year, you pretty much get nothing. It's you strike now and you try to get as much as you can. If it's like a second or third, that's fine, or a future first, that's great. And if you're a Cardinals fan, I think that's a simple answer. If you can get a coach the caliber of Sean Payton, you do it.
Sean Payton's spending these picks too, so he's not setting up the Cardinals or whomever in a position to be, yeah, guys, my ego's so big, you guys need to give up 3 1s, and then I'm going to come take over the team. No, that's not how this is going to go. If Sean Payton has a banger of an interview Thursday, and we're going to fast forward, and Friday morning he meets with his family, he meets with his wife and his kids, and he says, I'm going to take the job with the Arizona Cardinals. He calls up Mickey Loomis and the ownership for the Saints and says, make a deal with the Cardinals. I'm going to take the job. And what are the Saints going to do? No, you either do that or he says, I'm going back to Fox. I don't like the Broncos. Right. I didn't get a good vibe from the Panthers. This is the job I want. Get what you can for me. I appreciate everything. Write a thank you note. He'll be in the Ring of Honor. What are the Saints going to do? The Cardinals are going to know from Sean Payton that they're his team and he's their guy. So you try to save face and you get, maybe a first next year or 2 and a 2, whatever. But it's just like if you wait, you get less. It's common practice. Yeah. The Saints are already cashing these draft picks before they get them. The fan base there, it's just like, guys, they're not pitting these teams against each other. The Saints, everything that you read in the media on Twitter streets, this is the Saints trying to drum up interest that's not there. And it's Sean's decision at the end of the day.
Right. It absolutely is. What do you think that Denver is balking at as far as Sean Payton? You think it was the asking price as far as draft pick compensation? It's the price tag year to year, what his salary would be, 20 to 25 million?
I wonder if Sean just wasn't overly interested with them, and in an effort to save face, he is allowing them to say, you know what, we're not interested in you. Because Benjamin Albright on his Twitter said that the ownership likes Sean, the football people want Dan Quinn. Right? The players there, a lot of them want Dan Quinn. Russell wants Sean Payton because he wants his career saved. Right. But when stuff gets out, guys, it's out on purpose. They want it to get out. And everything today has been damage control. When Sean Payton cancels the interview, the Broncos are out there telling everybody today, no, we don't love him. We like him, but we're doing our due diligence, blah, blah, blah. No. My guess is Sean met with them. Initially was going to meet with them again and said, you know what, why am I wasting my time? Now that could change, but I think Dan Quinn is destined, even with his interview today, to be the next head coach of that team. He was a finalist last year. They foolishly picked Nathaniel Hackett. They wanted to go the sexy coordinator route or for an offensive guy. They thought they were getting Aaron Rodgers, so they bring in one of his position coaches. I think Dan Quinn is going to be the next head coach of the Denver Broncos. So then it just becomes, Sean, do you want to coach next year? Or do you want to go back to TV? Because if you coach in Arizona, unlike Denver, you can bring in Vic Fangio.
Right. Yeah, you could. And that would be huge. What Fangio could do with this defense, with the pieces already in place, and what Sean could do with the offense. 10 of his 16 seasons or 15 seasons, because he had to sit out the 1 year because of Bountygate. It was a top 10 offense. I mean, what he does offensively, his game plans, and the way that he works with quarterbacks. He worked obviously with Drew Brees and was able to work with guys like Teddy Bridgewater and Jameis Winston at the end of his tenure in New Orleans. I mean, those guys haven't had better success in their careers before that. So I think you still have to keep that idea open, that Sean Payton, what he could do and get this offense and Kyler Murray back on track is what you really want from your next head coach. Because other than that, you're looking at a bunch of solid leaders, right? Guys more with defensive backgrounds. And then you really have to figure out and do your homework on who's going to be the offensive guy to help get Kyler Murray back on track, because that becomes just as important as who your head coach is.
I saw a comment earlier. I guess Tom Pelissaro from NFL Network put out a report saying that Avero and Frank Wright and Aaron Glenn are all still in the mix for the Cardinal job. They're not. They're not getting this job. At least that's not what I believe. Frank Wright is interviewing for OC jobs. If he comes here, maybe he's Brian Flores' offensive coordinator. Avero is not ready to be a head coach, presumably, and Aaron Glenn's defense was almost as bad as Vance Joseph's. That's not going to be the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. If the Cardinals offer Dan Quinn's accepting the job. If the Cardinals offer Brian Flores is accepting the job. They've got legitimate candidates, fallbacks, if they aren't able to lure Sean Payton or if they don't want Sean Payton after Thursday. And if he goes to the Denver Broncos, Bo Brock, and something turns around and it is a leverage play, people who don't want Dan Quinn, you better buckle up, because I think that becomes increasingly likely if Dan Quinn doesn't end up in Denver, that he could end up in Arizona, because he's not turning down a job 2 years in a row, especially with Dallas. I mean, Dallas is maxed out. I think this roster that they have, they're paying Dak a bunch of money. They got to rework Zeke's contract, cut him outright. They're going to try to fill holes. Like, I don't think Dan Quinn could have a better resume after 2 years than what he's done in Dallas. So if after, especially, we'd use the Byron Leftwich example all the time, you got to go get a job. So if he gets passed over, like, he's taken the Cardinal job. I guarantee it. He wouldn't interview with them if he wasn't interested.
I don't doubt that at all. It's a great point as far as the Cardinals candidates go, still in the belief that it would have to be not a doomsday scenario, but you're right. If he doesn't get the Broncos job, if Peyton, the betting favorite, ends up going to Denver, then then you've got Dan Quinn. It's weird because every draft season, you've got guys that you tab as can't miss, top 5, top 10 draft picks that are waiting in the green room in the 20s, right? There's guys that people just didn't think about, that organizations view differently. And we're going to see probably one or two of these can't miss head coaching candidates of this coordinator crop, or guys that have coached before, that aren't going to be head coaches of teams next year. I don't know if it's Dan Quinn. I don't know if it's DeMeco Ryans. I don't know if it's Sean Payton, but it's very realistic that one or two of those guys is either in their same job that they are this season, next season, or just doing something different, because that's just how some of these things work out. Like, some organizations aren't in on these guys and as big on these guys as everybody else is.
Good comments in the chat. We encourage you to keep the comments coming. Please like this video. It helps us share around the YouTube algorithm. Bucky Bird asking, are you guys concerned that Sean Payton could walk away after 3 to 4 years if things don't go well record-wise? Of course, that's always a concern, especially if you give up premium draft capital. What if Kyler Murray and he have a falling out? What if they can't get the quarterback right? That's always a concern. But I think you would rather have that gamble with a guy who has consistently had above 500 records for a franchise that doesn't have enough winning in their history. I think, again, you can a lot of these candidates, you can play it safe with a Frank Wright and say this guy made the playoffs in the AFC South and blah. Sean Payton, you're hiring Sean Payton and trading for him to help bring a Super Bowl to Arizona.